Campside Media.
Hey, Campside listeners, welcome to Inside the Tent, our series where we go behind the mic of our hit podcasts. I'm Anthony Pacillo, and I work on the film and TV side of Campside, helping to turn our series into screen adaptations. That's just one part of why I'm back here hosting for a second time. Second time, thank you very much, because Coal Survivor is as cinematic a series as we have. Luckily for all of us, we're here with our incredibly talented host, Nicolo Majnoni, who's back on the Shadow Kingdom beat for another season, and he's here today to tell us about Season 2, Coal Survivor. It's a series that shines a light on the murky power behind big coal in post-war America. Nobody on Earth knows these shadows better than Nick, so you are in for a real treat. If you want more exclusive content or behind-the-scenes anecdotes from our shows, make sure to go to joincampside.com to become a free member of the Campside community. That's joincampside.com. So let's get into it with Nick. Nick is going to tell us about his second installment of the Shadow Kingdom series, Coal Survivor. I'm too excited. A series not only about the chilling murder of folk hero and coal union leader Jock Yablonski, along with his wife and daughter, but about Jock's son's attempts to take the torch from his dad and a group of young revolutionaries alongside him who successfully fought back against the Shadow Kingdom of coal in the wake of tragedy and singular corruption. Nick, welcome. You're here in the tent with us.
I'm in the tent and excited to hear such a pithy and cinematic summary, my friend. Oh, yeah. I don't even know why I'm here. Let's end it right there.
Nick, tell us, if you don't mind, what in particular about this story grabbed you enough to change your entire life to tell it?
Yeah, that's a great question. In short, I grew up in DC, and I heard these family friends of mine tell me that to avenge a murder, they had taken over America's most powerful union when they were teenagers. And that was it. And they left it at that, and then went about their business and passed the turkey or had a glass of wine. And it just stuck with me. And I wanted to get to the bottom of it. And what I found, I thought I'd just create some family tapes for these people. I'd do an audio history. What happened was a 7-year journey, actually, where I changed my job, changed my life, recorded these people, traveled the world, and put together, with your help and Campside's help, I think the only time the story has been told in its entirety, the full story of the Yablonski murders and the quest to retake the United Mine Workers, from the brutal New Year's Eve of 1969 all the way to the early 70s. And here we are, about to release it. So that's what hooked me. That's what got me. This kind of like log line that I'd heard people say at family reunions, and it turned out it was not only all true, which I doubted at first, but there was so much more, and we get to tell that on the podcast.
So you talked about this a little bit in the podcast and just now. What did you learn about the Yablonski family in particular that I think surprised you the most, having known them a bit before you got into all this deep down the rabbit hole?
Well, this was a family that, in particular, my friend, that the person who is our protagonist, Chip Yablonski, was a person who fought the America's most powerful, most well-connected union, who, it will turn out, I don't know if this is kind of a spoiler, was heavily responsible, the crooked leadership of it, responsible for the brutal murder of his entire family. And he was able to fight for justice in the most lucid, legal, and administrative of settings, keeping his cool, facing off with the killers, but not facing them off in a knife fight or a gunfight, facing them off in a cool administrative court of law, step by step, by dramatic step, until he had them all cornered and done. We're just going to spoil the whole podcast. It's okay. We're friends here. I was taken aback by the tenacity and the calm, collected, just old-timey American grit of this character, of this protagonist, who, if I understand correctly, is going to be played by Cillian Murphy in a movie that will be shot sometime in the future. And I think that's a damn good casting choice, if I might say so myself.
Well, let's get into that a little bit. I have to say, the thing that struck me about this world personally, right out of the gate, were the flashier elements. Jock's murder, tough Tony Boyle and his totem pole of henchmen, this murder plot, the plottier elements of it all. That's what drew me in. And I was so impressed, I have to say, by your conviction to tell the second half of this story, no matter what. I think there's a kind of a gravity towards just telling that first piece and, just postscripting maybe the second half. So off of that, I mean, Chip obviously is the pulse, the beating heart of that second half. Are there any other characters as we all listen to this story in that second half of these young, dynamic revolutionaries? Some characters that we should look out for, some favorites you had, maybe even some that didn't make the podcast?
Yeah, Anthony, that's a great point, because the story is in its, the circles where it is known. It is known as this brutal murder and the quest to take down the culprit who was behind it all. But there is this second act, that actually, that Campside and Crooked really believed in, almost more so than the murder. We were all eager to tell the first half because you have to. But I was really encouraged by you guys to tell the second half. And the second half is really the story of these, in one case, teenagers, um, who, with no formal education or campaign skills, took over and won an election of. I say this, the richest, the most important union at the time, because it bears repeating. We don't think of the coal miners union as much of an enormous force today, but back in the 1960s, when America got an enormous amount of its energy from coal, the coal miners union was this, like, it was like dealing with Amazon, because if the coal miners walked, America's lights go out. That's it. That's a cold winter. So it has this enormous apparatus, very wealthy, very powerful. And these kids were the stars of the second act, defeat Tony Boyle and take over the union. And my favorite, my heart really belongs to this kid, Bob, who had to get a permission slip from his mother saying, but, Bob can go and join the United Mine Worker Campaign because he was underage. And he's an incredible voice in the podcast, and he just passed away. One of the last things he ever did was talk to me about the story right before he passed away, way too young. And he became the de facto treasurer of the United Mine Workers, because there was just a face. They put a coal miner as kind of the face of the new administration, but really it was 17-year-old Bob, who didn't have a driver's license, who ran one of the most prodigious treasuries of American labor in the 20th century. Um, and I mean, there's a ton of these stories. That's just one of them. We don't have enough time, but that's one I wanted to highlight. Um, and the stories of the people like Bob have not been told, as far as I know. We're really telling it for the first time here with Campside and Crooked.
Were there any people, Bob made it to the podcast? Were there any people that didn't get to participate that you wish they had? They couldn't for legal reasons. They'd passed away. You couldn't track them down. Anybody that you wish was in there?
Yeah, I mean, I wish. So there's a great. We just there's just not enough space. If this is an American, War and Peace Odyssey, if we could tell it in its entirety, it'd be 155 episodes. But we only had 8, so there's some voices like that really didn't get as much time as we could get. One was the great Don Stillman, who was. He really just like invented a mine workers newspaper out of thin air and gave them the equivalent of like the best online newspaper today, but back in 1970. Um, and also, a personal note, I really wish we'd have gotten more of the kind of coal operators, the kind of the corporate operators. I think there was room for them, but they were very reticent, and didn't really want to participate. They you know they were scared of how they would be portrayed, which I understand. I reached out to some, got very far with certain operators, but that's the operators are the ones that got away. But yeah, I mean, many people that I wish I'd gotten. Many of them unfortunately passed away. A lot of the coal miners who I wanted to talk to have all passed away. And but you know what, like Anthony, we got so many of them on tape. Many of them passed away. The legendary prosecutor Richard Sprague, who was part of the JFK kind of the assassination committee that looked into his assassination, he was the special prosecutor on this case, which you'll hear in very, very cinematic fashion, and especially in the last episodes. I got him just barely, and he passed away. Now he's no longer with us. Um, so I keep coming back to this, even if you're not asking me, but it seems I organically coming up that I'm very proud that I got some of these people on tape. Um,
Absolutely.
I just think you're going to hear something. You're going to hear these voices from people that were just from another moment in time, and it's just this wonderful set of characters that was going to be forgotten, if not by the inner crew, who of course knows and cherishes the story.
By the way, a moment in time, the archival that you have as well is remarkable. I was just re-listening to the first episode. Jock, Tony. I'm also struck by with Tony, oddly enough, and I'd like to talk about your craft here a little bit. How you balanced humor that's in the podcast, surprisingly quite a bit humor, and obviously the darker tones. There's a murder here at the center of this. There's, a nation hanging in the balance, and yet you still masterfully work in, I'm thinking of Tony specifically, slam poetry uh, moment. Pie in the sky, on the by and by. How did you blend all these different tones? There's a lot of different tones here, some really colorful characters, but also some real tragedy here.
Well, I think thank you so much. So much of the real masterful, the magic is from our great team. We had Karen Duffin was our editor who edited the smash hit Wild Boys with Campside. We had this wonderful writer Joe Hawthorne, all people in the crew, and what comes out of it is, you say rightly, a little bit of mix of humor in what is otherwise this is a tense, cinematic, dark story, but you're dead right. There is humor because it was so farcical. The killers were not professional. They were bumbling. They tried, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven times unsuccessfully to carry out their deadly mission. And that is, on one hand, horrific and not funny and tragic, but on the other, it's a little bit like a circus. I mean, they are almost. I wish there was a better word, but they are almost comedic in how incompetent they are, and in this story, and the villains, Tony Boyle, this just almost this caricature. Um, there are moments of it that are deeply funny. What all we can do in those moments, deep within a tragedy, when we see somebody slip on a banana peel, you have to honor that moment because it makes the other moments more vivid and more real if you set them against these moments of just pure absurdity and comedy. It's just a story that has everything. You're in the depths of a secret parking lot where Ralph Nader, the Bush v. Gore Ralph Nader, is getting Jock to run while these three killers are, got the wrong Yablonski and they're headed for a different. I mean, it's I could go on and on. You have to listen to kind of know exactly what I'm talking about, but you're right. There are moments of farce within this kind of Greek tragedy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's certainly Benny Hill could be the soundtrack to a couple of those trips to the Yablonsky house. But I say
Yes.
that because the music I wanted to talk to you about a little bit. If you could just tell us about how you can. I told you I just re-listened to the first episode. Now I'm walking around the house, beep boop beep boop beep boop beep beep boop
Yes.
beep. It's wonderful and it communicates the tone so effectively. How did you all end up there?
So the music, thank you for that, by the way. The music was a wonderful parallel odyssey. Perhaps Anthony, you could sing it more as we can weave that in as I answer. Um, the music was the crowning jewel of this, and we had, thanks to Campside, an opportunity to get a cellist to perform original music that I wrote for this. Throughout the podcast, by the way, you're going to hear all original music. It's not a library. You're hearing it for the first time for this show in particular. And I sat with this for about a year, and I tried to come up with music that represented this atmosphere. And we got a wonderful cellist, friend of Campside, to come in. We recorded her, and then with the supreme, the genius that is Mark McAdams from Campside, he took this and created this beautiful symphony of sound. So Mark and I very much partnered together. But I'm very proud of that. It might sound like a silly thing, but you just don't get to do that very much anymore. You're just not really allowed to make shows like this. And for some accident of fate, everything aligned. And we got to tell the most incredible secret story of American labor ever. We got to score it as if we were a Quentin Tarantino movie, and I was Ennio Morricone with a huge budget. I'm so glad you caught that, because it's all original music. Um, and I hope it makes it even more of a kind of a cinematic ride.
Well, it sure does. Well, you're talking about cinematic rides. So you mentioned Cillian Murphy. So there's a movie that's being developed currently. There was a movie in 1986, I believe, Charles Bronson playing Jock. There have been a couple of cracks at this. It remains a largely unknown story, and so it was. I was so I was in awe when I found out you had been working on this. But there have been cracks at it. For your crack, I have to ask if you could do anything here. If you tell the movie, what's the Nick version movie TV show? You know what? You can take your pick here. Dealer's choice.
Yeah. Well, first off, we have to mention also the Anthony Pasillo screenplay. I'm not gonna let that go. There was also another piece of cinema history, which was, I think, you also riffed on a possible screenplay for this, right?
Yeah,
If
the
are we
beep
allowed to
boop beep
say?
boop beep boop beep. That's all I'll say. That's better.
Okay.
That's better than my screenplay.
Understood. Well, not true. But yes, there was an amazing HBO, I believe, like a 1986 home box office production. I could be wrong, but I think Wilford Brimley was Tony Boyle.
That's
And
correct.
okay,
That's correct.
um, I don't think it made enormous waves in American cinematic history. But there is now a movie. This is public knowledge. You can read about it in the various trades. And it is based on the majestic book Blood Runs Cold by my friend Mark Bradley, who is a wonderful, wonderful writer, and with Cillian Murphy starring as, I believe, Chip. Um, I am excited for the movie. I hope it gets done and it starts shooting quickly. I would love, if the folks at Universal are listening, God, I would love a small little nod, if we can, to the kids that took over the union. Which, by the way, Chip, aka Cillian Murphy, was involved in as well. So I hope that the movie, if not spending a whole act on it, does show us some scene of the kids storming the halls and taking over the union from the adults. That's my great wish. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see what they do with this, with the filmed version.
Amen. My version. This is not true. I'm being a little silly, but I actually would watch this. I would pay money for this. Paul Walter Hauser on Broadway, one man show, Crime and Punishment style. Tony Boyle wrestling with what he's done. 6 hours long. No, it doesn't have to be that long.
Yeah.
But
Oh, that's good.
just Tony himself in his head. Why'd he do it? How'd he get there? It's a
Yeah.
remarkable. People are. I can't wait for people to hear the series, but just to the arc that Tony goes on from his childhood until the very end is astonishing. And so he is just such a standout character to me. Obviously, he's not somebody you're going to root for, probably. I don't know, to each their own. But he's hard not to just be, you have to pick your jaw up off the floor a couple of times based on what he's done.
Yeah. I love that, actually. Joking aside, as you say, a spotlight on this villain, this kind of cartoonish Disney villain who, we had the great privilege of, as I said, we had Karen Duffin as our editor, a giant in kind of podcasting and radio. And she would always say, villains make sense in their own heads. She said, there's nothing interesting about a villain who's just cartoonish. Oh, he's pure evil, and that's it. That's a Disney movie. There's something about, without it in any shape or form, or any kind of way condoning what Tony did, it is always interesting to get into his head. Where's he coming from? He's from, it's out west, it's hard Scrabble towns with nothing, came from nothing. was beaten savagely in his youth, and he is the protagonist. So it would be nice to see that one man show where Tony tells his side of the story. There's no world where Tony is forgiven. Tony deserves everything he got, but boy, I'd watch that. Let's talk offline, Anthony, when the show is over. Let's develop something.
You're on. You're on.
That'd be so good.
Are there any moments that have from the podcast that have stuck with you in particular now that it's in your rearview mirror, where you find yourself thinking back an interview that you had with somebody, a visit to a location? Are there any things that stand out as particularly impactful for you personally, having been on the ground reporting this?
I mean, there's a million. I'll pick one out of a hat. Actually, one of the final trips I ever did was to West Virginia, and a kind of a co-protagonist of the show, this very colorful coal miner called Eddie Burke, took me around West Virginia and showed me what the sites were like. What were the mining points of of West Virginia that I discussed on the show. He's like, you got to come see him. What are you just sitting in New York? Like, come on, with your laptop and your button down shirt. And so I went and I spent a lot of time with Eddie Burke in West Virginia. And one of the most moving scenes that wasn't planned at all, and actually is how we end the entire podcast by pure chance. We were walking around the cemetery, and Eddie was telling me, and you look around a specific cemetery in West Virginia, it was all coal miners. So all the headstones was all, belonged to local 12, local 105, 105. It was all coal miners buried. Many of them died of black lung. And underneath the cemetery was a rich seam of coal, which runs through the state of West Virginia. And Eddie was taking me there to show me the headstone of this great, union organizer who he really loved. And it was, it sounds cheesy, the guy from the big city and goes and, experience some real dose of coal miners in America, but it wasn't, there was something very real about it. The coal underneath us, the coal miners buried immediately above the coal, Eddie Burke and pulling me this way and saying, come see this headstone of this guy, Sid Hatfield. It was such a beautiful moment. And if people can listen to the end, you'll see how it fits into the very end. And it really it really hit me. This is the story, ultimately, deep down, it's a story about coal miners, and which, hundreds of thousands died on the job in the course of the heyday of coal. And many of them burned, maimed, and sort of tortured underground. And nobody, anecdotally, you hear about coal miners, and coal is in the news politically with the right and the left. But they're just these hordes of people that died that are in kind of, these tiny graves all over the kind of the coal seams of the United States. And anyway, I'm rambling a little bit, but it was a moment that got to me, and I think we decided to give Eddie the last word of this podcast. So you'll hear him take you home at the very end.
Well, Nic, I think it's fitting then we'll let Eddie take us home here. It's such a powerful and emotional story, and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I only got to do it because people like Campside allowed strange lawyers like myself to take time and do it. So I should say thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much to Nic and the rest of the Coal Survivor team. And thank you for listening to Inside the Tent. If you haven't already, don't forget to go to joincampside.com to become a free member of the Campside community. That's joincampside.com.